I can't attribute anything larger to it, but I was about 16 years old. And again, I was a very lucid, like, I don't want to say grounded. Let's just say I was, I still feel that I'm the same person as I was when I was like that age. I just remember feeling, just aware and grounded. It was the middle of the day. It was just like I was going to walk downtown with one of my good friends, and I ran upstairs to grab my shoes, and we were going to walk downtown. And I hear this like dragging noise. Let me see if I can it is this kind of noise. And I look over, and on my desk, the padlock that I kept for my gym locker, I saw it move across the desk, just, and then it tossed itself like halfway across the room. It wasn't violent, but it was so weird. And it was like, every time you see something like in a movie, when somebody sees something kind of unfathomable and they act like an idiot, that was how I was. I looked around, I was like, was there an earthquake? I'm looking around to see if anything else is shaking. Not that an earthquake makes a padlock just throw itself across the room. That wasn't, and I looked to see if my windows were open, as though a breeze could have done that. And I even went over and I picked up the padlock again, like an idiot in a movie, and was like, huh? And I just kind of looked around. I was like, okay, so that happened. I can't explain it. I'm always the show me the science person. I'm like, well, that was very odd. And then along similar lines, this is a thing that my mom gave me. It's this old thing where when they used to have coils of stamps and it would come out here. It's where I keep my guitar picks, right? And I've had this for years. And when I was in college, I just had it on my desk because it had my picks. And I'm sitting there at my desk, and this just goes blink, like that. Just pops off. And you can see there's nothing there. This isn't airtight. This is like a slit. And it happened more than once. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but those are a few things that I've seen that give me enough pause in all of my scientific rigor to say, I've seen some things that I don't understand why it happened. I don't know what happened. I'm not going to draw any conclusions, but I can just say that was really weird. I don't know what that was. I can't explain it. So that's my mundane one. And then my kind of oddly beautiful one is that I was at a party when I was about 22. I was young enough that I hadn't been that many places in life. I'd been to high school and college, and that was it. And it was up in Tahoe, and there was a girl there, and I just knew immediately I just kind of liked her. She just seemed cool. And we were talking, and I kept trying to place her. I'm like, I think I know this girl. How do I know this girl? How do I know this girl? Because there wasn't a clear way we'd know each other. And midway through the conversation, she's like, dude, I'm sorry if I'm tripping out, but I swear I know you. And I'm like, okay, right? I feel like I know you too. And then we kept talking, and she's like, it's so strange. I feel like we're friends. And she's like, I know what your laugh sounds like. It's so weird. And so we stood there for about an hour, kind of tracing out our entire existence. Where did you spend Christmases as a kid? Did you ever travel this place? Kind of exhausted everything. Because at the age of 22 or whatever, it's you haven't been, even if you've done some traveling, there's not that much, there's not that many places you could have met somebody if it wasn't in school or whatever. And I remember her just kind of shrugging and saying maybe it's a past life. And it was the first time I was ever God, what an interestingly weird thought. Whatever it was, this immediate sense of deep, kindred, friendship with a stranger that was a mutual feeling was very, I don't know, interesting, cool, that was really, really cool.
Did it sort of feel like coming home? It was
Yeah.
you're oh, there you are.
Yeah, it was recognizing, it was don't think I've seen you someplace, and yet you're so familiar to me that I feel like I must know you. I feel like it must be like, you know, when you talk about, like, when people talk about having like amnesia or like a head injury, and like they recognize that the person in front of them is somebody they love, but they can't tell if it's their mom or their child or their wife or whatever. It was like that. It was like this person that I'm like, I know, I feel like I know you and I feel like I adore you, but how do we know each other? And why are you feeling the same way too? You know, and it wasn't just like we were vibing off each other. It was like, it was something weird. Um, and I remember, like, you know, I after that I would see her in town and run into her in the store and stuff, and she was great, but it was always so strange to have this feeling of like, why do we know each other? It was very surreal. Um, and then I guess maybe the last thing that I would be worth sharing, only because it's actually proven to be helpful to me. So if it might help anybody else, it's worth sharing, right? So I I was going through a really hard time when I was a teenager, like every other teenager, and I was feeling very deeply existential and alone in the world and everything. And it was a time where I was like, I was spending a summer abroad in France, which sounds like really exciting, but, and it was, and I'm glad I did it, but it wasn't easy. You know what I mean? It's like I have a really wonderful family. I really missed them. It was sort of my first time feeling, it wasn't like I was alone, but feeling alone, right? And I remember I'd go for these really, really long walks and having this moment of feeling like just like that I just didn't want to be miserable. Like, but I was having such a hard time not being miserable and about thinking about myself in the past of times where I was like a kid and had been upset or somebody had been unkind to me or something, and thinking about how we have a tendency to look back on ourselves with kind of this like gentle compassion of like a benevolent older sibling, you know, to think back at like the terrible haircut you had in fifth grade or, you know, whatever. There's this like this gentleness that we can extend to ourselves in the past that we have a hard time doing for ourselves in the present. And in that moment, I realized that the future me was going to be extending that kind of benevolence to the me that was suffering. And I remember kind of really like that helped me a lot in one moment. And I remember kind of taking that moment and saying to myself, like, essentially, okay, Gretchen of the future, remember to come back to this moment and give me the strength that you'll have in that time. And so sometimes if I'm feeling that kind of just like terrible, like just desperation and need of some sort of solace, I'll make that promise to myself. And then in the future, when I feel better, when I feel proud of myself for having persevered in some, you know, in a moment that was really difficult, you know, whether it proved to be a good moment of triumph or a challenging moment of, you know, humiliation or whatever, the point is that if you can kind of make the promise to yourself to come back to that moment with compassion and kindness, it's really comforting in the moment. And that had this sense, maybe magic's the wrong term, but that sense of larger connectedness, like connectedness with like a part of yourself that's like your essence that you know you can call back, you know, at different times.
Okay, that's ridiculously gorgeous. I just want to make a couple points. Okay, first, I just love how you reference your first story about the padlock moving on its own, that little canister, the lid flipping off on its own as quote unquote mundane. Because if those things would have happened to me, I would have been like, mundane is the last word. I would have been like, hello, everybody. Come, everybody see this? Let's form a new religion to worship whatever's happening here.
The little pick holder. Like
I mean, so that was so funny and charming. I was like, I just love it. Um, and how powerful to just have that moment where you're feeling so alone and you give yourself grace, right? So it's almost like you traveled into the future
Hmm.
to give your present self grace
Yeah.
in that moment because we can be so hard on ourselves,
Hmm.
so hard on ourselves. And sometimes we can go whole days, weeks, months without being kind to ourselves.
Yeah.
But what you're really talking about is this moment, this kind of revelation at
Hmm.
that time where
Hmm.
you could, oh, I see Ferdinand. Okay.
Are you
Okay,
gonna
you
show how beautiful you are?
look at how beautiful he is. Okay, everybody. Ferdinand is gorgeous. I'm just putting that in. Look,
He's a handsome boy.
and I love it when cats just wake up from a nap because they're
They're
so,
all messy.
yes, and they're smooshy. They're kind
Yeah.
of smooshy and you want to
Yeah.
smoosh them.
Yeah.
But it's like almost you gave yourself a benediction,
Mhm.
one that you needed in the moment, and that changed everything. And it's simple and we can do it every day. So
Mhm.
yes, I thank you. It's
Mhm.
simple and powerful. So thank you.
Oh, well, like I said, it's been bizarrely helpful to me. And what I always tell people when I tell them about this, like little thing that my brain does or whatever, or that you know, this interaction between my current self, past self, and future self, is the one thing I always say is, but here's the deal: you can't leave yourself hanging. So if you in a moment reach out to your future self, that becomes like a flag in your personal, like I can tell you every time I've done that because I don't just do it every day. I do it in those moments where I'm like inconsolable, I am existentially alone. And the point is, because you got to keep a record of those, because you got to go back, not just tomorrow, not just in a week, but those become your little moments where you're like, I got you, I got you, I got you, you know? And otherwise, you cheapen your own, as you called it beautifully, you know, your own sort of benediction. You know, you want that to be something that you call upon when you really need it and you go back and you give it with total commitment.
Okay.